Hey guys, welcome back to the Friday Vlog, where we discuss activity that goes on here with the BuzWeaver channel. That includes things like current events, headlines that are in the news, pop culture, social media, technology, and items of interest that come up during the week that allow us to have a little bit of a dialogue. If this is your very first time to the channel, welcome. And to all of you on New Tech and my subscribers here on YouTube, I want to thank all of you guys for your continued support.
At the risk of stating the obvious, from the Washington Examiner, U.S. was better with President Trump than with President Biden. President Joe Biden was supposed to bring welcome change from Donald Trump. He was going to be the nice guy president. He was not going to lie. He was going to be competent and respected. 8 months into his presidency, he has not done any of these things. Instead, he has left the clear impression that he is in way over his head and the United States was better under Trump than Biden. Now, of course, there's a lot of snarky little underlying comments here to suggest that either President Trump was not a nice guy, that President Trump lied, and that the president was not respected. I'm pretty sure Trump was very competent in his ability to communicate, which is far better and exceeds what Joe Biden is able to do. And then 8 months into his presidency, Joe Biden has probably done more to damage the country than any president that we've probably had in our history, at least in the recent times. Now, I know what some people are saying. It's a pandemic, the pandemic, but there are decisions you can make, despite there being a pandemic, that can improve the country, because if you watched any college football this weekend, or even the professionals, or just in general, people are out again and functioning within normal parameters, as it would say, if you want to be all technical and whatnot. But the idea that the country has improved since Joe Biden is a bit of a stretch, because it just hasn't. It's perceptual. The Democrats, the Trump detractors, the left, the progressives, the activists, all those are in kind of this superficial mindset of appearances and optics and feeling. So it isn't really about the substance of things, but the fact that Joe Biden can come out and just say a very scripted, a very well-designed, very staged performance, and then the left is completely satisfied. They're not looking for solutions. They're not looking for tangible results. They aren't looking for things that actually improve the country. They just want to feel good. Daily Caller poll. Less than half of Americans say Biden is mentally stable enough to serve as president. Now, it should come as no surprise to anyone why I identify Joe Biden as the establishment-appointed surrogate president, because President Joe Biden was retired. He was at home, doing his home thing, whatever he does there at his home, down in his basement, as they like to often refer to him, as doing things down there, apparently. But he was brought out because he had the whiff of Obama on him, and that he would just be, the counter to President Trump, because the establishment did not want to be held back for another 4 years, is essentially what's happening. And it is very apparent that Joe Biden just doesn't have the energy, the pizzazz, the capability to really be in this sort of leadership role. And when the establishment said, "We got your back, Joe Biden," that pretty much was a clear indicator that they were going to make sure that Joe Biden was in place so they could manipulate him. Because it isn't about the actual leadership of our country or the country benefiting as much as the establishment finding ways to take advantage of our country and our systems to then benefit themselves. And you hear many times the left say that that Trump was simply in it for himself. But the thing is, with President Trump, let's entertain the argument that President Trump was in it for himself. At least he was also benefiting the country in the process. There's a difference. There's a difference between Trump being in it for himself and not benefiting the country, and President Trump being able to benefit from the things that we have in this country, our free market system, which he's familiar with, as well as our constitutional republic, our liberties and freedoms. So President Trump was complimenting himself as well as the country, whereas Joe Biden, it's a clear, distinct line between the establishment benefiting themselves at the expense of our country. Now, I typically don't like to rely on polls, as we were just looking at here, because these polls are, this is based upon a Fox News poll. And, Fox News is just one source. And, people who do statistics can obviously, or people who do statistics can just, obviously look for things that they want to look for and make adjustments according to how they want to project their data. So I like to use Real Clear Politics. As you can see here, his approval is at 46, his disapproval is at 50. And then if you take into consideration the amount of effort that's produced by the mainstream media, all across the legacy media, and just kind of, pop culture, they're always helping Joe Biden out. So, I mean, even the media completes his sentences, rewrites his statements without all the hemming and hawing and stuttering and other things that he does. So they basically complete his sentences for him in any of their articles and writings. But as you can see here, in Real Clear Politics, he's showing a 50% disapproval. So if you take into the fact that the media works extraordinarily hard to make him look good, we could say that his disapproval could be as high as maybe even 52%. And then if we go to Civex, which is a really nice aggregate as well, they use a larger sampling for their polls, as I understand it. And you can see here his disapproval here is very consistent with what Real Clear Politics says, and that is he's at 51% disapproval and 41% approval. But one of the things, too, that's been really huge before we jump into the horseback riding one is that the clear indicators for me, you guys already know that I perceive a lot of this as being the fact that the establishment wanted to be back in power, but we see it very clearly here. For example, Democrats cannot use $3.5 trillion spending bill to give millions of immigrants a pathway to citizenship. Senate parliamentarian rules. So you have the Democrats within the Senate, the parliamentarians, as it were, actually keeping the Democrats from being able to push certain measures and bills because even they know that, we're a country of balances of power to ensure that craziness doesn't happen, because craziness is happening right now under Biden with his absurd pushes and demands and basically out there just, setting aside the Constitution and just going with edict. I mean, just going out there and just saying this is the way we're going to do it, regardless of SCOTUS, regardless of legislation, regardless of Congress. He's just going and doing what he wants to do by decree, as our good friend Tim Pool would say, is that Joe Biden is ruling by decree. And so when he's challenged, he just makes another decree, like we saw with the moratorium extension there. And so the big news story this week also was the border agents on horseback round up Haitian migrants after closing Rio Grande crossing, where 15,000 have congregated under Texas Bridge. More than 300 arrived back in Haiti, as up to 8 flights a day are scheduled to deal with crisis. Now, this heading here has changed several times, and this is why I had to use this image here, because this is also changed from the original article. But the big news was really, if you guys have seen some of the images here, they're, and I empathize and sympathize with all these individuals who want to come here to the United States. I really believe that these people are making a concentrated effort to come here to make a better life for themselves. I believe that 100%, which always leads me to wonder, how is it that we have all of these activists from the various different tribal groups complaining about being oppressed, suppressed, alienated, isolated, while they are Americans themselves, entitled to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the freedoms and liberties that are given to us? How can they not see the level of effort, the degree of sacrifice that many of these immigrants are involved in, that are trying to come into our country? How can they not appreciate and value what they actually have, what these people are looking for? So the big news, as you see here, what's interesting about this is I want to make a couple points here, is that as I understand it, a lot of the food that they're carrying, they actually purchased in Mexico. So what they're doing is, since the conditions are a bit harsh on the American side, on the U.S. side, a lot of the Haitians and others are actually going back into Mexico to get their water and food. And the problem they're running into now is they're running out of money that they brought with them to get them into the United States and so forth. But the big issue here, as you can see, I'm just going to show you a few pictures. I want you to make a note of the reins, the extended reins on the horse. Now, reins are used, obviously, to control the horse. And sometimes they extend these reins so that if they're holding a weapon or an item or something in their hands, there's enough slack for them to be able to still manipulate the horse and have enough slack to be able to hold the item in their hands. And here you see another rein. Now, it's conceivable that as the horse is moving and swinging around, if you've ever been around horses, these reins go flying all over the place when they're very long, or when things are long things on a horse, as a horse is moving, is going to be slinging around. And that's essentially what's happening here. These are very selective shots from this camera angle. And the thing about camera angles is that this guy and this rein here and this officer, this rein and this guy, they could be 3 feet away from each other because you have that forced perspective and angle. And so, you know, these are just things that are used often because photographers, like the media, sell their images and sell their product, and they want more people looking at them. And you see here more of the rounding up, because basically what they're trying to do is they were trying to tell the Haitians, you know, don't go over into this particular area, but they continue to go over that area. Now, it could be a language barrier. It could be just a communications barrier. It could be that they had a desire to be in a certain spot, and the border agents were telling them that they couldn't go there. But see, so you have to take the mainstream media, and this is the thing that really, really, really irritates me about this, is because the Democrats, the mainstream media, the legacy media, the activists within our own government that are in positions of power treat people as though they're just too dumb to understand what's actually happening. And that's why I'm here to kind of explain this to you. Take the complicated, take the difficult, take the absurd, take the exaggerated, take the sensationalized, and bring it into a more coherent framework. So AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar denounced Border Patrol whipping at Haitian migrants as a stain on our country and human rights abuses. Now, don't you find it fascinating that in the last several months, as much as we have been trying to get the president or even the vice president or even the squad, for example, to acknowledge there is a crisis at the border, the only way they could acknowledge the crisis was for these border agents to be trying to round up these Haitians. Now, see here, here's another clear shot of a rein. Now, they keep saying that he's whipping, or they're whipping these people, but as you can see here, his hand is grabbing this guy by the shirt to move him, so the rein is free. The rein has, you know, he's not holding the rein. And that's because he needed to be able to reach further out to maybe grab this guy. And so he had to release the rein. And like I said, on a horse that's moving, and it's going like sideways and moving around, things on the horse are going in different directions too. They're slinging around. Reins in particular are going to do that. And so he had to let go of the rein to be able to grab this guy. And so this is allegedly what Ilhan Omar was saying was whipping. And the thing about it is, I might have to look at by word. Let's see, because she mentions, now she doesn't say it here, but they refer to what the reins as old-time slave whips. And I tried to find it by word, but these could be images here instead of that. But it doesn't matter if a Democrat or Republican is president. Of course not. Of course it doesn't matter. Of course it does matter. Matters to her. Our immigration system is designed for cruelty towards and dehumanizing of immigrants. What? Oh, it doesn't. Okay. Immigration should not be a crime. It isn't a crime to immigrate here correctly, as President Trump would say. Come here legally and properly. And, you know, the border crisis is a crisis, and it's not acknowledged as one because, of course, it makes Joe Biden look bad. If you guys want to see this particular article, you can look it up on Yahoo News. And I apologize. I know I used to always link all of these articles below my video, but we're running into issues with YouTube, and also because of the way that YouTube prioritizes users. They're putting mainstream media way above any of us as creators. So for example, if you were to look up like current events or anything that I'm covering here, you will probably get 10, 15, 20, 30 pages of mainstream media before you even get to a YouTube creator. So shifting gears here to Australia, who have all but maybe one infection that I've seen sometimes as low as one infection in parts of the country, but yet they are resorting to this very tyrannical system to where U.S. Republicans call for sanctions against Australia over police treatment of protesters. So similarly to the United States, but not exactly, the UK, Australia, Canada, and countries in the world proclaim to have freedom of speech, but in reality they don't. And the best way for me to describe it, and I know it's kind of cynical and a bit sarcastic, but to me, in my opinion, a lot of the way these foreign countries conduct their laws or the way they enforce their laws is really they just do whatever they need to at the moment, or kind of make up the rules as they go along, or selectively enforce rules as they go along. So when people in the UK or Canada or even Australia try to convince me that there's freedom of speech in those countries, it's just it's not. It's clearly apparent that these governments are more interested in maintaining control over the people. So while these individuals may entertain the thought of them being sophisticated, the reality is that they are in fact domesticated. But we can see here that this is an elderly lady. This was part of these individuals here, including this lady, were part of a media team or press corps of people there covering the events. And this was this was the other day when the people were busting through the line, if you guys may have seen it. And these reporters and stuff were on the side, just trying to avoid the big rush of the madness of people rushing through. And so once all the people had run by, then the journalists and reporters and camera people tried to film the people running from behind. And that's when the police just started whacking on all of them, because I guess their line of argument is that they can't make the distinction between who the protesters are and who the actual news media are, because we see that here in the States. BLM, Antifa, and activists will dress just like press and run around with cameras and mics and everything, pretending to be press just to be able to get that extra level of immunity from being stopped or approached by a police officer. But the police don't know, so they'll stop them anyway. But you can see here they're grabbing up this lady here. I've seen some very, very, very disturbing and troubling video of medical teams, kind of holding and chasing little children around the doctor's offices and stuff. It's actually it's just very heartbreaking and difficult to watch. And then even police detaining a parent, or even, I think they hit the parent and knocked the parent to the ground when some of the medical team was trying to give a vaccine to a child. It's so difficult to watch. So difficult to watch. But while we're still here, while I still have some of your guys' attention, I thought this was a very interesting article. Troll farms reached 140 million Americans a month on Facebook before 2020 election, internal report shows. Now, this is part of that establishment type, we talk about it often when it comes to the 2020 election, but this also goes back to the 2016 election, where we have levels of election interference. In 2020, it seems as though the Democrats were going to make absolutely sure they were going to do their own sort of interference by changing laws and rules. And then, of course, the pandemic came along, which allowed them to make even more concessions, even broader abilities that made our elections less secure. But in this article that you guys can look up, you'll see all of the data, the percentages, the amount of people that were affected, and just how a lot of these agencies. Now, see, this is saying out of Kosovo and Macedonia, but, of course, we had the Russian influence, we have the Chinese influence, we have soft power out of China, and then Iran. And so the troll farms are part of a target here. It says for the UK and Australia, it says troll farms primarily affect the US, but also target the UK and Australia. And they kind of come from different areas. So it's India and Central America. Central and South American countries are also affected by it. And it's not unusual. I mean, the internet makes it easier for people to be able to do this sort of activity. And I would argue that TikTok is made up of a majority of this bot type behavior just because you can just kind of tell from like accounts, and particularly like on my account when I do certain things, or when I go to different TikTok accounts that I look up specifically, you can kind of tell, you know, how is it that someone can have 4,500 followers and 0 following, and they're not following a single person, and yet, you know, there's 4,000 followers. I mean, this is the typical inflated numbers that we see out of China to artificially produce like popularity, which is kind of interesting, because this is why like the CCP, the methodology of China and our adversaries are very similar to that of Democrats, because they rely on a lot of superficiality, the general appearance of things, the illusion of things appearing to be one way when in reality they are another. But yeah, I'm total agreement here that the U.S. was way better off under President Trump than it is under Joe Biden, or more specifically, the establishment. So that's what I have for you guys this week.
All right, guys, so that's going to wrap it up for this Friday vlog. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the comments. Your guys' participation here on the channel is very important. So when you guys leave your comments and your likes, it's always appreciated, as it adds to the actual content and or the engagement. If you haven't already, guys, below this video, you'll find the various social media links that I belong to, so make sure you avail yourselves of that. And of course, if you're here on YouTube, that would be the channel icon appearing right there on the screen to subscribe, which you can click on to actually subscribe, as well as select notifications if you want to know when there's content being released here on the channel, to include those video shorts that I really enjoy. And I'll see all of you guys right there behind that camera next week.